Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Doctor's React. My name is Dr. Abe, and I'm with
Dr. Emma.
Today's episode is season 4, episode 2. I think it's a continuation of last episode. So, without further much ado, let's go. Yeah, I think he's in COVID ward.
Intubated. Must be in intensive care.
I think last time you did explain what intubation was.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't look good.
Yeah, something's going down.
Yeah, amble bag, everything up. How did it feel during the time when people came in with really bad cases of COVID? Because we all know that when you have COVID, you have a high grade temperature, you're coughing, you're not feeling well and stuff like that. But not everybody needed to come to the hospital, but this looks bad.
Yeah, so the main reason people would need to come to hospital is if they're so short of breath and they're requiring oxygen therapy. And it did get to the point where people couldn't breathe for themselves, so they had to go to intensive care to be intubated, which we spoke about last week, as we've said, which basically means that a tube is put into the windpipe so that a machine can breathe for you. So I didn't work on intensive care, I worked on the medical wards, which meant that my patients were either those who didn't need intensive care or who weren't candidates for intensive care. So you have to already have a good, healthy baseline before you can go to intensive care, because otherwise, once you're there, it's really, really difficult to leave, and it's almost like you won't survive a stay in intensive care if you don't have a good, healthy baseline. So we did have some patients that were really sick. On the wards, you can give the maximum amount of oxygen you can give is 15 litres. So what we'd sometimes see is we put people on the maximum amount of oxygen and then you just have to watch them deteriorate, and there's nothing more you can do. So it's really difficult when, it's already been decided that this person is not a candidate for intensive care. You do all you can, so you're giving them maximum oxygen, and then there was just nowhere else to go, so you just watch them deteriorate, which is quite difficult.
Yeah, it's quite emotional too. And you kept saying candidate for intensive care, because I know that at the height of the COVID and the pressure on the ICU, you need to meet certain criteria before you can be transferred to the ICU. Can you tell us any of those?
Yeah, so luckily I work in a big teaching hospital in London, so it wasn't a case of there aren't enough intensive care beds, which I know that in a lot of countries that is the case. So we're really privileged,
and even other parts
here.
of London, actually.
Yeah, even other parts of the UK that aren't so privileged. We were really, really privileged in that it wasn't that there was a scarcity of beds, but it was more a case of this patient is just not going to survive an intensive care stay because they already don't have a good baseline. So there's really no point taking them there. It's just cruel for the patient and cruel for the family.
Yeah, and it's also, as you said, cruel for the family, because they would think bringing their relative to the hospital is going to do all they can, but sometimes all we can is not enough. Sometimes all we can is not enough. Let's check up the next clip. This is sad. This is really sad. You see, when relatives can't get in contact with their family, social distancing, healthcare personnel had to hold the camera so that families can see their loved ones, and
they're switching off all the machine.
Literally pull the plug. Wow, that's quite emotional. How did you go through that? Because as a healthcare personnel, I can feel the pain. We as doctors, we need to show empathy, but it got to a point where it had to even transcend empathy to sympathy, because it became personal. You see people just go on a regular basis than you've ever seen whilst working in the hospital. How did you take it?
100%. So I think the main thing is that it wasn't that we're not used to seeing people dying, because we are. But the main differences were people had to die alone, which is really, really upsetting. And also it was just so many more people dying than we'd see. Like there could be multiple deaths on a ward per day, which I'd never ever had to deal with before. So that what happened in that clip, that happened to me several times. I'll hold up we had iPads donated to us so we could FaceTime family members. You hold up the iPads and the family are just shocked because, their relative doesn't recognize them or can't speak, or obviously hasn't seen them sometimes for ages, so didn't know how sick they were. I remember there's one case where a patient's family members were stuck abroad, obviously because of the
travel ban,
the lockdown, the travel ban. So the patient's family was stuck abroad, and they didn't have capacity for video calls. So I think it was just a normal WhatsApp call because they were abroad. But the patient just couldn't speak. So obviously the relatives were on the other end of the phone, crying, really upset because they just couldn't hear from their mum because mum wasn't in a position to say anything. So times like that are really difficult.
Really. Yeah, and also it wasn't only in the hospitals, even in care homes and everywhere, the elderly and those who are most vulnerable were the same story, same depression, and it was a really bad time.
Really, really difficult. And you want people to get better and feel motivated, but they can't see the people that are their motivation.
Exactly.
So it was really, really difficult.
Exactly. Oh wow, that's quite sad. All right, let's move on to our next clip. Okay, this looks like a storeroom filled with what? I think some scrubs, I think some aprons. Probably this is where they store their PPE and stuff like that. Yeah, probably. That brings to my PPE. I think we did talk briefly about it the last time. Okay, for those who might not know, probably those who might watch this video 10 years from now, can you tell us what PPE is and what were the main challenges initially when the pandemic broke?
Everyone thinks PPE is a new thing. It's been called PPE for years, but you just didn't know about it. It stands for personal protective equipment. So it means anything from gloves to aprons, face masks, shields, all different things comes under the umbrella of PPE.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think at the beginning there was a lot of confusion because people didn't know how much PPE they need to wear to be protected from COVID. And I feel like the guidelines were changing a lot.
Exactly.
And Public Health England had one set of guidelines, but then a certain hospital may have a different set of guidelines. And I know it caused a lot of anxiety for people. I know people were talking about the F95 masks, which are the really tight ones. I absolutely hated wearing those. You literally feel like you can't breathe.
Exactly.
But you have to wear it for certain procedures. Now the policy is that if you're doing a procedure that's what we call aerosol generating, so something that's likely to generate aerosols from the patient that you could then breathe in and catch COVID from, you have to wear that mask. So thank God we didn't have to wear them all the time, but there was a period of time when it was recommended that we wear them all day, and it was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, and it was also very confusing because I remember early he had some makeshift rubber suits.
Yeah.
Like obviously all your arms were exposed, your neck and everything was exposed. Initially, as the data was coming in, we thought COVID was just, what do you call it? Face-to-face or aerosol. Then we had now it's airborne, and it kind of like it kept going. And as more information came in, as more data came in, the recommendations for PPE that changed, improved, kind of like it was changing almost weekly. To where we are now, I think we are at a point where there's more knowledge of COVID as a whole. There's a deeper understanding of it and how to protect ourselves.
Things are changing all the time, and I think that's the main thing that the public need to remember, that science can only be retrospective. It can't predict the future. So unfortunately, when it's a new virus, we have to wait to allow the scientists to examine the trends and the patterns to know, what is this virus and how does it behave. So there was a lot of time, I think, at the beginning when everyone wanted answers quickly, but unfortunately we just had to give some time so that we could learn how the virus behaves. I think we're living in an age where we want things as quickly as we tap our phones, basically. Literally.
But there seems to be some good news on the horizon. Pfizer seems to have developed a vaccine. I don't know how potent it is, but hopefully it helps solve our problems as soon as possible.
I think a lot of people are hopeful, so let's see how it goes.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Emma. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I'll leave her details up on the screen, and we'll be here ready and waiting for the next episode to react to it. We also have some of the previous seasons up and ready for you guys to listen. I love you all.
See you next time.
Later.